My name is Rachel Lewis, and I live in Oklahoma. One night, the blare of my phone jerks me from a dreamless sleep at 2:43 a.m. My security app flashes red with an urgent notification. The camera by my greenhouse had caught movement. My pulse quickens as I ran outside in panic and froze. The gate was hanging wide open, the chain sliced clean through, shards of glass scattered across the path. The sound echoes in my chest, each step forward revealing more and more chaos. Inside was even worse. Rare Colombian orchids ripped apart, bonsai snapped like twigs, and herbs for a luxury restaurant order trampled into mud. In one night, my $24,000 contract was gone. Before I continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because what happened next will make your family drama look small. I stood in the ruins of my greenhouse, trembling. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. For a moment, I thought maybe this was random vandalism, some drunk teenagers passing by. But the precision of it, the chain cut so neatly, the destruction so deliberate, didn't feel random. I remembered the camera. My security system had recorded everything. My stomach twisted as I opened the app and scrolled to the saved video. My thumb hovered over the play button, hesitant, almost afraid of what I might see. Part of me prayed it would be strangers, faceless intruders, so at least I could call the police, file a report, and move on. But when I pressed play, the world I thought I knew came crashing down. At first, the image was shaky, the camera lens catching the faint glow of headlights sweeping across the yard. A figure stepped into the beam. And then his face. My breath caught. It was William, my brother. I froze, staring at the screen, unable to blink. The headlights illuminated him perfectly, his familiar jawline, his messy hair, even the old jacket I recognized from years back. There was no doubt, no mistake. My own brother was standing in front of my greenhouse with a pair of scissors in one hand and a bottle of beer in the other. He wasn't drunk and stumbling. He wasn't out of control in the way I remembered from his past meltdowns. No, he was steady, calm, almost methodical. I watched as he moved through the rows of plants, scissors flashing under the lights. Snip, snip. Rare orchids that had taken me months to nurture fell to the ground, their roots torn apart, their delicate petals crushed under his boots. He picked up a bonsai tree, a 100-year-old piece of living art I had bought from a collector, and snapped it in half across his knee like it was a twig. And then he started shouting. The microphone on the camera didn't catch every word, but the tone was unmistakable. Rage, spite, venom. I caught fragments. Think you're better. Flowers over family. Pathetic. Words slurred, yes, but not by accident. He knew what he was saying. Then came the part that sent chills down my spine. William turned. Slowly, deliberately, he looked straight into the camera lens. Into my eyes. And he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a brother playing a prank. It wasn't even the wild grin of someone drunk. It was cold. Mocking. As if to say, look, Rachel, this is for you. This is what I think of your little empire. My legs gave out, and I sat on the cold ground of my destroyed greenhouse, clutching my phone, staring at his face on the screen. But he wasn't done. He knocked over containers, smashed terracotta pots, pulled herbs from the soil, tossing them into the air as if mocking the hours I had spent planting them. Then, in one final act of theater, he climbed onto an overturned container and sat down, beer in hand. He raised the bottle toward the camera, tilted it slightly, as if clinking glasses with me through the screen. Cheers, sister. The casual cruelty of that gesture pierced me deeper than the destruction itself. He had planned this. It wasn't an outburst, it wasn't a drunken accident. It was a performance, staged for my benefit, recorded so I would see it, so I would know it came from him. I let the video play again, desperate to catch anything I had missed. Each time I watched, the reality sank deeper into my chest like a knife. That was my brother, the boy I had shared a childhood with, the boy who once built forts with me in the backyard, who sneaked extra cookies from the jar so we could eat them together in secret. That boy was gone. In his place was a man who had decided to destroy not just my greenhouse, but everything I had worked for, everything I had built with my own hands. Why? That question echoed through me louder than the glass crunching beneath my shoes. Why would he do this? Was it jealousy? Because I had chosen my business over family, as he had accused me before? I pressed pause on the video at the moment he smiled into the camera. His expression burned into me. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about orchids or contracts. It was about power. About showing me that he could reduce me to nothing with one night of violence. I stayed there until the early morning hours, replaying the video. My body felt numb, but inside, my heart was a storm, shock, betrayal, grief, rage. I had always thought the worst thing that could happen in business was losing a deal, a contract falling through, crops failing. But nothing compared to this. Because when the enemy is outside, you can defend yourself. But when the enemy is your own brother, smiling at you through the lens, raising his spear as if to toast your destruction, there is no defense. And as the sun began to rise, the broken glass of the greenhouse catching the first light of morning, I knew my life would never return to the way it was before 2:43 a.m. A week before everything shattered, we had what my mother called a normal family dinner, which in our family meant the kind of careful politeness that could crack into argument with one wrong word. I had driven up to Nebraska for the weekend because Mom said she missed me and because she'd promised to make her apple pie the old way. The house smelled like childhood butter, sugar, fried onions from the green bean casserole, Dad's aftershave lingering by the hall mirror. It all felt cozy enough to make me let my guard down. We ate in the dining room, the one reserved for holidays and serious talks. William arrived late but breezy, kissing Mom's cheek, clapping Dad on the shoulder, tugging at my ponytail like we were teenagers again. He had that grin he uses for company, easy and harmless. I noticed, though, that he didn't meet my eyes for long and he didn't ask about the greenhouse beyond a quick houseplant world, as if my livelihood were a quirky hobby. Mom placed the pie on the sideboard to cool while we worked through roast chicken and mashed potatoes. I brought a salad of hydroponic greens from my greenhouse to be polite. Dad took a forkful and remarked that it tasted like leaves, which made Mom sweat his arm, but he didn't smile. I could feel it then, like a draft under the door, a topic waiting to be let in. Dad folded his napkin into a tight square, set it next to his plate, and cleared his throat. "Rachel," he said, eyes on the table, "William is out of work again. Maybe you could take him on at your greenhouse." I sipped my coffee because my first instinct was to defend myself, and I've learned that speaking second keeps me from saying something I can't unsay. I put the mug down carefully. "Dad, I need specialists right now," I said as evenly as I could. "I've got a contract with a hotel. They want consistent supply, microclimate control, disease management, propagation. It's not just watering." Dad snorted, not even trying to hide it. "What's so complicated about watering flowers?" I looked at him, then at the table, because if I met William's eyes I knew I'd see that old dare in them. Go ahead, say no and see what happens. "It isn't about complicated," I said. "It's about qualified. This is my first big account. If I miss one delivery window, I lose the kitchen and I lose the reputation that comes with it." Mom reached across the table and took my hand, the way she used to when I was little and scared. "Family should stick together," she said, voice soft, eyes already pleading. "You two need each other more than you think." William smiled then, and on anyone else it might have passed for sheepish. On him it looked like a coin flipped in the sun, bright on one side, shadow on the other. He kept quiet, which was unusual. He just watched me. I could feel the temperature of the room shift as the pause lengthened. "William," I said, choosing my words, "the tasks I have right now can't be learned in a day. I can recommend a short course at the extension office. If you're serious, I'll pay the fee, and when you pass, we can try part-time to start." Dad leaned back like I'd insulted him personally. "Your brother needs a job, not school." "Yes, your brother needs a chance," Mom added. "Isn't that what you had when you started? People believed in you." I thought about the nights I slept in my truck behind the greenhouse before I could afford cameras or proper heating, the frost scraping the inside of the windshield at dawn. Nobody offered me a chance then. Chance is just a word for work you haven't watched. But I didn't say that. I just rubbed my thumb along the rim of the mug and tried to keep my voice calm. "I'm offering a path," I said. "A real one." But I can't risk this contract. William finally spoke, not to me but to the room. So the plants matter more than your brother. His tone was light, but his words were not. I looked up and met his gaze. His eyes were cool, no anger, just a flatness I recognized from other times he decided I was an obstacle. He held my stare a beat longer than necessary, then pushed back his chair. "I'm going out for a smoke," he announced, even though I'd never seen him smoke anything but attention. Mom squeezed my hand again. "He's proud," she murmured, as if pride were a medical condition, and I was the specialist who could treat it. Dad shook his head and stood to slice the pie. The knife hit the plate with a sound like a small hammer. He served everyone but me first, then set my piece down last with a clatter that wasn't quite accidental. We ate dessert in politeness, so thick it felt like chewing cloth. William returned, smelling like cold air and something sweet bitter, and made a show of complimenting the pie. "Best in the county, Ma," he said, and she beamed, grateful for the normalcy. No one mentioned the job again. We talked about road construction and the Husker season like we were strangers who'd picked the same table at a diner. When I left, Mom wrapped 2 slices of pie in foil and pressed them into my hands, and Dad walked me to the porch without speaking. William hovered in the doorway. "Drive safe," he said, and if you only heard the words, you'd think it was kindness. That night in the guest room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. The house creaked in familiar ways, pipes knocking, floorboards clicking as they settled. I kept replaying the conversation, editing it in my head, wondering which sentence I could have softened, which condition I could have eased, which part of myself I could have bent without breaking. Every version still ended with the same problem. My business needed competence, not charity. At dawn, I packed the pie into the cooler and started the drive back to Oklahoma. The highway unspooled in front of me. I told myself the tension would pass once the weekend was over, the way summer storms move on and leave the air clear. I told myself we were still a family. I told myself a lot of things. When I stopped at a gas station outside Salina for coffee, my phone buzzed. A new message from William. "You always think you're better than us. Let's see how long you can last without your family." I stood under the harsh fluorescent lights, thumb frozen above the screen, the coffee going cold in my other hand. The words bled into one another, then sharpened. I typed and erased 3 replies, calm, reasonable, appeasing, before locking the phone and slipping it into my jacket pocket. I got back in the truck, set the coffee in the holder, and started the engine. Drove the rest of the way in silence. When I arrived, I buried my phone under a stack of invoices on my desk and focused on the irrigation schedule, the lighting cycles, the humidity charts tacked above my workbench. Numbers felt safer than people. By late afternoon, when I finally checked my notifications, there it was, William's name lighting up the screen like a warning flare. "Your plants won't make you happy." No hello, no context. Just that. For a second, I thought it was almost sad. A cheap jab at something he didn't understand. I typed, "Please stop texting me if you're angry." I offered a path. That's all. Then I erased it. Then I typed, "I can help you enroll in the course Monday." Erased that too. I settled on silence and turned back to the ledger, penciling in fertilizer costs as if balance could be restored by arithmetic. The second day, he doubled down. The message arrived before sunrise, a time of day when I usually feel clear-headed, when the greenhouse glows gently and the orchids open like quiet mouths. My phone buzzed while I was measuring EC in the nutrient tank. "I'll teach you to appreciate your family." It wasn't a request. It was a promise shaped like a threat. I read it 3 times, then slipped the phone into my apron and finished the morning checks with a tight throat. My hands moved on muscle memory, pinch, tilt, drain, missed, while my thoughts chased themselves in circles. Appreciate your family. In our house, that phrase had always meant comply. Bake forgiveness into every decision and call it love. Still, I told myself he would cool off. But on the 3rd day, his tone changed again. All afternoon, a storm had flirted with the horizon, a bruise of cloud that refused to break. I worked late to secure loose trays and tie the shade cloth tighter, a small insurance against wind. My phone battery dipped to 3%, so I plugged it into the wall near the sink. When the chime for a new voicemail echoed off the glass panes, the sound made me flinch. The transcript feature caught most of it, but I pressed play anyway, because tone matters. He was drunk. Not the hilariously sloppy kind. The mean kind. The kind that finds the tender spots it remembers from childhood and pushes hard with a smile. There was a clinking, a breath that sounded like a laugh, and then, "You'll regret choosing your stupid flower beds over your brother." I laughed then, sharp, humorless, a burst of sound that startled even me. It wasn't joy, it was pressure releasing. I laughed out of anger. Out of shock at his audacity. Out of the absurdity that the boy who once begged me to cover for him when he broke Mom's music box now felt entitled to smash my livelihood because I wouldn't give him a job he didn't want to earn. I laughed because if I didn't, the alternative was crying, and I had deliveries to make in the morning, and crying makes your eyes puffy, and chefs don't want to hear about family drama with their basil. I saved the voicemail and saved the texts. I told myself it was smart to document, to create a record, to be prepared. But if I'm honest, part of me saved them because I didn't quite believe him. Not the way I should have. I believed in his threats the way you believe in a tornado watch when the sky is still bright. You keep half an eye on the horizon, but you still go about your day, confident the funnel won't touch down on your street. That evening, I drafted a single-line reply and never sent it. "Please don't contact me again tonight." It sat there in the text box, blue cursor blinking like a metronome to my hesitation, while the greenhouse hummed its steady electronic lullaby. When I finally went home, I locked the door twice and slept poorly. I dreamed of hands reaching through netting, of scissors glinting in headlights, though I wouldn't recognize that image's accuracy until later. I woke before the alarm with my jaw sore from grinding my teeth, thought to myself it was stress, and got on with the day. 3 days. 3 messages. Each one a notch deeper, a step more brazen. First disdain, then control, then threat. And now here I was, standing in the wet crunch of broken glass, the air sharp with sap and fertilizer and the coppery tang of cut stems. The benches were splintered, the trays appended, the soft bodies of orchids torn open like pages ripped from a book. I replayed the sequence in my head, and the pattern snapped into focus like a Polaroid finally developing. This wasn't a flare-up. It had been an outline. I had laughed at his gall, at the childishness of the phrasing. But the wreckage around me corrected my arrogance. I knelt and picked up an orchid stem, velvety, limp, petals bruised to the color of old fruit, and felt the truth settle heavy and immovable. The next morning I drove to my parents' house with the police report on the passenger seat and the flash drive zipped into a little canvas pouch, the kind I used to keep seed packets in. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned, my throat felt raw, and there was soil under my nails I hadn't managed to scrub out. Nebraska sunlight came down flat and merciless, turning the frost on their lawn into glitter I didn't feel worthy of looking at. I parked by the mailbox that my dad had painted years ago and just sat there with the engine ticking as it cooled, palms pressed to the steering wheel. If I walked inside, there would be no pretending anymore. If I turned around, I would be the same old daughter, too dramatic, too independent, too something. I rang the bell and let myself in when Mom called. "It's open." Her voice was warm, habitual. The same voice that read me Little House books when I had a fever. She was in the kitchen in her robe making oatmeal, the radio set to low local news. The normalcy of it almost knocked me down. "Morning, honey," she said, and then caught the look on my face. "What happened? Where's Dad?" I asked. "Where's William?" "In the living room," she said cautiously. I walked down the hall, the carpet flattened where people always step, and the gallery of family photos looking back at me with frozen smiles. In the living room, William sat sunk into the corner of the couch, phone in his hands, thumb moving. He glanced up, expression neutral, then back down again like I was a commercial he could skip. Dad was in his recliner with his coffee, newspaper folded on the footstool. He stood when he saw me. "Rachel? You're early." I set my bag on the coffee table and took out the folder with the report. My hands felt too big for the job. I filed with the sheriff. "They'll be following up. I brought something you need to see." I held up the flash drive. "What's this about?" Dad asked, but his voice had already gone wary. I didn't answer him. I turned to the TV, fumbled with the HDMI port, and slotted the drive into the adapter. The blue menu bloomed across the screen. For a second, I saw our reflections in it, me standing small and tight, Dad already paler, William still slouched like a bored teenager. I selected the file. Play. The footage filled the room. Headlights washed the gravel. A figure entered the frame. Even before the camera caught his face, I felt Mom move in behind me and grip the back of the sofa. Then the angle caught him full on. William. Under the white glare, there was no wiggle room, no looks like, no could be. He was right there, scissors glittering, beer bottle swinging from his fingers like a metronome set to spite. Mom gasped an involuntary, animal sound and pressed her hand to her mouth. Dad's color drained so fast I heard the recliner creak as he sat without meaning to. William didn't look up. On screen, he did. He smashed, he cut. He shouted those half-heard insults that still made their meaning clear. He turned to the lens and smiled, the same smile I had seen 12 times in 12 replayings, and it landed in my parents' living room like a dropped plate. Then he climbed onto that overturned container, sat, and lifted the beer in a mocking toast to the camera, to me, to the girl he knew would watch. I paused the video there, the bottle midair, the smirk suspended. Silence, but for the coffee maker clicking off in the kitchen. Nobody breathed. My mother spoke first. Not the question I expected, are you all right? Not the apology I knew I wouldn't get. I'm sorry we didn't listen. Her words came out like a script she'd practiced for years. Rachel, you can forgive him. He's your brother. Family is more important than money. My jaw went loose. I looked at her and then at the screen and then at William, who finally raised his eyes to mine. There was no panic in them. Just calculation, like he'd been waiting to see which path we would all take. Family is more important than money, Dad echoed hoarsely, as if he needed the line to remind himself what part he was playing. Family? I said, and my voice cracked on the first syllable. I swallowed and tried again. That wasn't a storm that happened to pass over. He did this. He planned it. He wanted me to see it. Mom reached for me, palms smoothing the air like I was a skittish horse. He made a mistake. We all make mistakes. I clicked the video forward to the part where William kicked the bench so hard the cedar cracked like a bone. This is not a mistake, I said. This is destruction. Of my work, of my contract, of everything I've built. On the couch, the live William leaned back, spreading his arms over the cushions, eyes bright with a daring gleam. You gonna play it again? He asked lightly. Maybe we can get popcorn. William, Dad warned weakly, but it sounded like a habit, not a boundary. I pulled the police report out of the folder and placed it on the table. I filed charges, I said. The deputy will be in touch. I'm here so you can see what happened and understand what I'm going to do. Mom flinched like I had struck her. You can't send your own brother to Rachel, no. Think about what that will do to this family. Think about what he did, I said, and my voice, for once, was steady. Think about how it would feel to walk into your kitchen and find someone had thrown every dish you've loved onto the floor and ground their heel into your bread. Think about the years that go into learning a thing with your hands and then watching those hands unmake it. Dad stared at the paused frame, his own son frozen in triumph. He rubbed his forehead with his palm and left a red streak. We'll fix it, he said, as if money could be poured over this like water on a grease fire. I'll talk to him. We'll pay for. It's not about paying, I said. It's about what kind of people we are. Something in him hardened at that. He dropped his hand and looked at me with the old stubbornness that used to manifest as lectures about car insurance. We are people who keep family business in the family, he said. We don't air it out to strangers who don't know us. Deputies are not strangers, I said. Laws are not strangers. They exist for exactly this. William snorted. You always did love rules more than people. I ignored him. I turned to Dad. Did you ever think it might come to this? I asked. That someday your son would use what you gave him to hurt your daughter? What do you mean what we gave him? Dad's gaze flicked to William and then away so quickly it was almost nothing, but it wasn't nothing. I saw the flinch. I saw the guilt float up like silt. Tell her, William said lazily. She's dying to know. My skin went cold. Tell me what? Dad stared down at his coffee like the answer was somewhere in the dark surface. We gave him a spare key, he said finally, the words coming out flat, practical, like weather facts. 3 years ago. Just in case. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the TV stand to steady myself. A key to my house? My voice was too loud. Just in case, he said again, as if repetition could retrofit logic. In case you locked yourself out, in case there was an emergency, in case. In case what? I asked. In case you needed to teach me a lesson about gratitude? Mom's eyes filled. We only wanted to be sure someone could check on you, she said. Oklahoma is far. Your father worries. I looked at William. He didn't look away. He wore the same expression from the video, confident, entertained. Every memory revised itself in an instant. Times I'd come home to a faintly moved object and blamed my own distraction. Times I'd felt watched and chalked it up to paranoia. The locks I'd replaced once when I lost my ring of keys at the farmer's market. The way the back door sometimes stuck, as if it had been opened during the day and swelled in the heat. He had always had access. He had had it while they smiled at me over pie and told me to give him a chance. Something inside me split with a quiet, decisive sound. Why you didn't tell me? I said to my parents. You made a choice about my safety and my home, and you didn't tell me. Mom dabbed under her eyes with the sleeve of her robe. We thought you'd overreact. I laughed once, a small, dry thing. You think this is an overreaction? I pointed at the screen where William was toasting our ruin. You gave him the tool. Don't talk about your brother like that, Dad said reflexively. I stared at him, at the man who taught me how to braise a Sunday roast, who checked my oil before every college drive back to campus. I tried to reconcile that man with the one who had decided behind my back to hand my house over like an extra garage opener. I couldn't make them occupy the same body. I'm going to follow through with the report, I said, each word careful and separate, like stepping stones across a river. I'm going to change my locks today. I'm going to. Dad stood. Rachel. I am going to do what the law says I can do when someone breaks into my property and destroys it. Even if that someone is a person you love. Especially then. William stretched, joints cracking. Show's over, he asked. Because I've got places to be. Sit down, I said without looking at him. He sat, but only because he could make even that look like a favor he was granting me. I won't apologize, Dad said, voice tight. We did what parents do. We made sure there was a key in case of emergency. And William created one, I said softly. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The paused image on the TV lit the room with a cold, artificial light. I walked to the set and reached out like I might be able to touch the glass and feel heat from those headlights. My reflection was faint over my brother's lifted bottle. I pressed the flash drive between my thumb and forefinger until the edge bit into my skin. Rachel, listen me. Family is more important than money, Dad said again, as if the third time could transform a mantra into a shield. Then ask yourself what kind of family you want to be, I said, and pulled the drive from the port. The screen went black. The room dimmed. In the emptiness, I could hear my own heart knocking like someone at a door that no longer had a key. I waited for William to sputter some half-formed denial. Wrong place, wrong time, deepfake, anything a cornered man might grab on the way down. Instead, he tipped his head, studied my face the way a kid studies an anthill before he kicks it, and then he laughed. A bright, delighted bark that bounced off the family photos. Yes, it was me, he said, savoring each word like they were candy. You wanted to feel like a business goddess? Now you know what happens when you spit on your family. The sentence didn't just land, it unfolded, revealing the small curled thought at its center. Mom moved first, mother as shield. She stepped between us without seeming to cross the carpet at all, hands lifted, palms out, as if I were the one advancing. William, she hissed, but it wasn't a correction. It was a cover. She turned to me with pleading eyes already damp. He didn't mean he's under so much pressure, your grandmother's health, the rent, those friends he shouldn't have, he's been trying. Trying what? I thought. Trying weapons until one fit his hand. Dad didn't speak. He reached for the end table drawer, pulled out the old blue checkbook with the cracked vinyl cover, and flipped it open. Tell us the amount, he said to me, voice steady in a way I recognized from every practical emergency of my childhood. We'll pay it back. William slouched deeper into the couch, triumphant. See, he said. Nobody needs cops. Family handles family. He said it to me, but he was performing for them, too, as if to prove that the old strategy still worked. He breaks, they buffer, I fix. I looked at my brother's hand, loose along the back of the sofa, knuckles nicked, a faint crescent of soil still clinging to the cuticle of his thumb. Evidence has a way of ignoring apologies. Mom, I said, stop standing in front of him. My voice didn't raise. It flattened. I'm not the danger in this room. She faltered, as if I'd pushed her with a breath. He's your brother, she said, the oldest incantation in our house. He's blood. And I am what? I asked. Water. Dad finished writing the date as if that were the most urgent logistical detail. What's the number, he repeated, so I can make this right. Money won't make this right, I said. It will replace the plants, he said. It will replace the glass. The benches. Whatever those tiny trees were. Bonsai, I corrected. And no, it won't. William's smile thinned. Listen to her, he said, twisting the knife into the performance. She likes the throne too much to come down. I turned fully to him. He had expected tears or fury. He hadn't budgeted for the quiet. You're really proud of this? I asked. He shrugged. You needed to learn. You forgot who was here before your precious chefs and hotel people. You forgot the family that drove you to the nursery when your truck wouldn't start. You forgot the couch you slept on after that storm knocked out your power. I didn't forget, I interrupted. I added work and risk and responsibility. I added the part where actions have consequences. Mom put her hand on my arm. The gesture landed like a permission slip I hadn't asked for. Sweetheart, he confessed, she said softly, as if confession itself were currency. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted him not to do it, I said. Barring that, I want him to face what he did. Dad tore a check from the book with a quick rip. Write in the amount, he said, thrusting it toward me. We will figure out the rest with the sheriff. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We'll cover the hotel penalty. I didn't take the paper. I thought of the contract letter folded in my office drawer, of the neat, merciless language. Failure to deliver constitutes breach. Breach triggers penalty. I thought of the chef's impatient voice, the way he holds herbs up to the light like an appraisal. It's not about the money, I repeated. It's about self-respect and consequences. William laughed again, but softer, as if we were sharing a joke. Consequences. He glanced at our parents with exaggerated curiosity. Since when? After William's words, I turned to my father. The check trembled between us like a thin white flag. Behind it, my mother's face crumpled. She looked at William, then at me, as if choosing which child to triage. I expected another round of bargaining, or threats about holidays, accusations about pride. Instead, the only thing left to be said was the thing I had brought with me like a stone in my pocket. I'm not withdrawing my statement, I stated. Let the law teach him what you didn't teach him. William's grin faltered for the first time, not into remorse, but into surprise that the playbook he relied on had been replaced without notice. Dad closed the checkbook gently, as if quiet could undo sound. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. I picked up my folder. The zipper rasped shut. My heartbeat slowed to a steady, practical pace. I walked to the door, then paused and turned back. I loved the idea of us, I said. But you don't get to use family like a crowbar on my life. Not anymore. No one moved to stop me. The house watched me go, all its pictures and hinges and hairline cracks. Outside, the winter light felt clearer than it had in days. I put the folder on the passenger seat, started the engine, and let the quiet in my chest expand until it had room for the next necessary thing. The morning after the confrontation. I swept another aisle, filled another contractor bag, and tried not to look at the empty spaces where color used to live. I moved on autopilot, label, salvage, discard, telling myself that if my hands kept moving, my head wouldn't fill with the echo of my family's words. I was alone. That sentence hurt and, in a strange way, steadied me. I was prying loose a bent misting nozzle when I heard tires crunching on the gravel. Then another set. Doors thumped shut, Footsteps approached, and I braced for a deputy or a neighbor with questions. Instead, Earl Martinez stuck his head through the frame, cap in his hands, the way men remove hats in sanctuaries. "You look like you could use some hands," he said. Behind him was his wife, Becca, with two of their teenagers and a stack of milk crates. The Martinez family sells eggs and peppers a few stalls down from me at the county fairgrounds every Saturday from April through October. We've traded seedlings and gossip for years. I didn't know their birthdays, but I knew exactly how they like their soil amended. "What are you doing here?" I asked, and my voice made it sound like a challenge when I meant it a shock. "News radio said what happened," Becca said. "Then the paper put a photo up this morning. We figured talk is cheap." She lifted the crate like a question. "Where do you want us?" Before I could answer, a battered truck pulled in behind theirs. Kel from the Bee Co-op hopped out with gloves tucked in his back pocket. Two flower farmers I knew only by first names, Jenna and Ruth, showed up with pruning shears and grafting tape. Someone brought coffee. Someone else brought bakery boxes. In minutes, my grief inventory turned into a harvest line. We moved slowly down the rows, hands gentle, voices low, the way people speak over hospital beds. They showed me how to cut above clean tissue, how to save a node that might root, how to repurpose irrigation hose into temporary ties. The teenagers asked if they could reshelve intact trays. I nodded and tried not to cry when one of them hummed under her breath like this was just another Saturday. Earl worked beside me without commentary, passing me a roll of blue painter's tape for tagging survivors. "Loss ain't the end," he said finally, almost to the soil. "Loss is the beginning of inventory." By afternoon, the cracked benches looked less like a battlefield and more like a triage unit. We had a maybe table, a probable cart, and a narrow bench labeled Miracles, which made Becca laugh once, dry and bright. The shared rhythm made space in my chest that the night hadn't allowed. Between tasks, people told me about their own worst days, a late frost that wiped out a month of strawberries, a hailstorm that pummeled dahlias into pulp, a generator that died in a heat wave. Every story ended the same way. Someone drove over with a spare, someone loaned a freezer, someone showed up. Just when the light began to slant, a dark SUV rolled in, clean enough to look out of place among the dusty pickups. A man stepped out in a blazer too thin for the wind, shoes that had never met mud. He looked at the greenhouse, at the people moving like a well-drilled crew, at me with tape stuck to my sleeve and a streak of soil across my cheek. "Ms. Lewis?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and straightened without meaning to. "I'm Daniel Park, Director of Procurement for Heartland Suites, the very hotel chain whose contract I had mentally mourned at 2 in the morning. I hope this is an okay time." I felt the words I'd rehearsed, apologies, plans, revised timelines surge up, then vanish as he went on. "We saw the article in the local newspaper about the attack," he said, glancing briefly at my wreckage and then meeting my eyes again. "If you manage to grow such a farm from scratch, then you can rebuild it. We'll give you a deferral." For a moment, the greenhouse seemed to tilt. The noise around us faded into a far-off hum. I searched his face for the catch or the clause. "A deferral?" I echoed. He nodded. 60 days to re-establish supply. We'll adjust menus, feature seasonal items from our other partners, and keep your slot. Your story matters to our guests, but more importantly, your product matters to our kitchens. We want you back." He hesitated, then added, "We believe in second seasons." Something hot pricked behind my eyes. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said, and the words came out rough. Earl made a satisfied sound behind me and went back to his crate, pretending not to listen, which was the kindest thing he could have done. Park handed me a card. "Call me tomorrow," he said. "We'll put it in writing." He glanced at the heat lamp shadows pooling along the back wall. "Is there anything we can send over now? Labor? Temporary structure?" "We've got bodies today," I said, glancing around at the people who weren't mine and somehow were. "But heat. I lost 2 units and the nights are still cold." He nodded like a man making a list. "I'll see what I can do." He left as quietly as he'd arrived, tires whispering over gravel. 20 minutes later, a beat-up sedan pulled in, coughing at the exhaust, and my chest lifted at the sight I didn't know I needed. "Ms. Klein, My high school biology teacher, climbing out with a milk crate full of heat lamps and extension cords. "Don't just stand there," she called, in the same brisk tone she used when I froze over a dissection tray at 16. I raided the lab. "You can't do that," I smiled, and she arched an eyebrow, daring me to stop her. "You've always been the most stubborn of all," she said, thrusting a lamp into my hands. "Hang in there." The teenagers cheered. Cal found an outlet. In minutes, the back corner glowed like a sunrise, and the Miracles bench looked a little less fanciful under the warmth. Miss Klein walked the rows with me, touching leaves, issuing orders. "You're going to lose more than you save," she said without apology. "Save enough, and you'll be fine." We worked until the edge of dark. Someone started a pot of soup on a camping stove outside. Someone else set out paper bowls and plastic spoons. When I finally sat on an upturned crate and wrapped both hands around a steaming bowl, the heat hit my palms and then my throat and then something deeper. Conversations braided around me, calibrating pH, planting calendars, whose kids needed rides next week. I watched faces illuminated by work lights, the easy competence of people who fix as a form of love. None of them owed me anything, but all of them showed up anyway. The greenhouse smelled faintly of cinnamon from some forgotten hand soap and of something else, green, alive, impossible to kill with one night of malice. The footage ended the arguments before they really began. In the county courtroom with its varnished pews and the flag drooping in conditioned air, my brother's lawyer tried to frame the night as stress, as accident, as a man pushed past his limit by circumstances and an overly sensitive sibling. But then the prosecutor cued the video, the lights dimmed, and there he was again, William under the headlights, scissors like a metronome of intent, the beer lifted in that smug little toast. The room made a collective sound, part inhale, part flinch. When the clip froze on his smile, even the bailiff shook his head. William stared at the table, then at the ceiling, then at me for the briefest slice of a second. He didn't hold the look. His jaw worked. His tie, a borrowed navy thing, sat crooked against his collar. His lawyer spoke of context, family tensions, a lapse in judgment. I sat very still and watched the screen replay what words tried to soften. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a voice like straight lines, asked 2 questions about chain of custody and authentication, then nodded. "The video speaks for itself," she said. "Stress does not cut chains. Accidents don't smile at cameras." William mumbled something about being sorry, about not understanding the extent of the damage. He said "my sister" instead of my name. He said "farm" like a joke. He didn't say why. The sentence came down clean. Full compensation for damages calculated from invoices, estimates, and the contract penalty letter. 250 hours of community service, to be completed with an organization not of his choosing. And a restraining order prohibiting him from coming within 300 meters of me, my home, my business, or any venue where I worked. The judge made him repeat the distance aloud. He said 300 meters, as if reciting a measurement from a textbook he hadn't opened. On the wooden bench beside him, my parents sat stiff, polished, heavy with a story they preferred. Mom fixed her gaze on the judge's nameplate. Dad studied his folded hands. When their chance came, they defended him without once turning toward me. "He's a good boy who made a mistake," Mom said, voice trembling like a plucked wire. "He was under strain." Dad added that William isn't a criminal, that family matters belong in family. No one asked me how I slept. No one asked me what it cost to walk into a room that used to mean joy and see it turned into a warning. Outside the courthouse, the reporter from the local paper stood by the steps with a recorder and questions about small businesses and resilience. The prosecutor gave her a bland sentence about accountability and community. I signed the restitution paperwork, accepted a copy of the protective order, and drove home without the radio, the silence a clean hallway I could finally walk down. Boundaries are dull compared to betrayal, but I learned to love their lack of drama. I installed a new alarm system with redundant cellular backup and a keypad that chirped softly when I crossed thresholds. 2 new cameras watched the greenhouse from angles that didn't care about theater. Motion lights went up along the fence like a spine. I replaced the locks and had the cylinders rekeyed by a locksmith who told me his daughter loved orchids. I nodded and kept my hands still so he wouldn't see them shake. I also changed smaller things that only I would notice. I moved the spare keys from the cheerful bowl by the door to a locked box. I bought a document safe and slid the contract copies and insurance papers inside like tucking in children. I set my phone to filter unknown numbers straight to voicemail. I stored the court order in my glove compartment and in my office drawer and as a PDF file. I told the sheriff's office I wanted to be notified if William attempted contact. The deputy wrote it down without comment, just steady pen on carbon paper. I also stopped answering my parents' calls. At first, the phone lit up every evening around dinner, then late at night. The voicemail icon stacked tiny red circles like berries. We should talk. Call me back. This has gone far enough. I let them accrue and then deleted them in a row, a small, decisive broom. They started driving down instead. The first time, I saw my mother's car in the camera feed before I heard tires on gravel. She walked to the porch holding a Tupperware, because in our family you deliver contrition in the shape of food. I didn't open the door. I watched from the office, screen bright, the image slightly fish-eyed so that the porch slats bowed. She pressed the doorbell twice, put her forehead briefly against the door jamb like she was measuring a fever. When I didn't answer, she looked straight into the lens she had once told me was paranoid and said, "Rachel, true family forgives everything." I pressed the intercom and spoke calmly for the first time. "Yes," I said, "but a real family doesn't destroy your dreams and doesn't demand that you forget the crime." She flinched as if I had touched her. She set the Tupperware on the mat, stepped back, and left. The cameras watched her car reverse, a neat arc of red taillights, and watched the porch sit with its new quiet. Later, I threw the food away. Dad came once without announcing himself, that old key muscle twitching in his hand as he stood at a door it no longer fit. I filmed from the window, the camera's red dot steady as a prayer lamp. He didn't ring. He stared at the lock a long time and then at the greenhouse, where the new panes flashed the sky back at him. He took out his phone, started typing, stopped, slid it back into his pocket, and drove away. I saved that clip too. Not everything you keep is for court. Some of it is to remind yourself what you saw. William tested the order once with a drive-by that put him at the edge of the 300-meter line, his car idling like a dare. The deputy called before I could. A neighbor had reported the plate. "He won't be back," the deputy said, and though I didn't believe in won't, I did believe in documentation. At night, the new system announced my movements with small chimes: entry, exit, secure. I learned the map of my property in meters as easily as I'd once learned it in steps. 300 became a circumference that felt less like a limit and more like a garden bed's edge, visible, enforceable, mine to tend. When my mother returned a second time, she didn't bring food. She brought old photographs in an envelope, the kind of memory bric-a-brac we used to spread on the kitchen table on snow days. She held one up to the camera, me and William in an inflatable pool, sunscreen stripes on our noses, both laughing with our mouths open, and said, "See? This is who we are." I pressed the intercom again. "It's who we were," I said. "Who we are is a choice." She stood there a long minute, the photograph trembling slightly in her hand. Then she put the envelope on the mat beside the phantom Tupperware and walked away. A year has passed. Somewhere between insurance paperwork and midnight repottings, I worked myself to exhaustion and then past it, saving everything that was left: money, energy, seedlings, even hope. And now the greenhouse is twice as big as before, steel ribs arcing like the inside of a bright lung. The new irrigation system is a grid of intelligent veins, feeding according to need instead of habit. We installed sensors that read moisture and salinity and talk to the controller in small, precise sentences. The shade cloth glides on tracks with an electric sigh, and the old hose I once dragged like a stubborn snake is retired to storage, frayed and dignified. I walk the aisles with a tablet in hand, but I still touch leaves with my fingers, because data keeps you honest and touch keeps you human. Private security was the decision I put off and then made with a signature that shook a little. A discreet patrol loops by after midnight. The cameras stitch together a panorama that doesn't miss theater or malice. There is a keypad at the service door and a badge reader at the office, and the chime of secure. Each night still feels like a benediction I've earned. Business followed the rebuild. Heartland Sweets not only kept my slot, they tripled the contract after the spring tasting when Chef Elena held a purple basil to the light and said, "This has lift." We built a staggered growth schedule that lets their kitchens write menus like seasons instead of like compromises. 2 months later, the university called. The botany department wanted a standing order for rare species, orchids for research, carnivorous plants for the teaching lab, desert succulents that would never meet Oklahoma weather except under glass. The first time I printed university account on an invoice, I took a picture of it for myself and then laughed at how official it looked. I don't do it alone anymore. That might be the biggest miracle. We're 4 people on payroll plus a couple of seasonal hands, but the core is steady. There's Shay, meticulous as a jeweler, who can spot spider mites before the webbing shows and whose handwriting makes even warning labels look elegant. Malik runs irrigation like a conductor, hears a clogged dripper the way a mechanic hears an engine misfire, and talks to seedlings in the same voice he uses with his little sister on the phone. Alejandra was a barista before plants stole her. She moves down the rows with a dancer's balance and remembers every customer's name, every preference, who wants rosemary with sturdier stems and who wants it soft for muddling. And then there's Joe, a retired electrician who came in to hang lights one day and never quite left. She is a toolbox that could rebuild a small country. They started calling themselves the Green Family in a joking text thread the week payroll first hit on time. I didn't correct them, and it stuck, not as a slogan, but as an agreement about how we show up, with all accountability. We have rituals now. Wednesday inventory ends with breakfast tacos on the potting bench. Friday afternoons, we choose a plant of the week. They keep an eye on me the way I keep an eye on the environmental graphs. If I work through lunch 3 days in a row, I find a sandwich on my clipboard and a post-it that says, "Eat." Plants don't like fainting bosses. There is also Anthony. He was the architect on the rebuild, deliberate, with a habit of resting a palm against materials as if listening for their answer. He drew skylines for a living and then spent months learning our language. At first, we met at dusk with site plans spread on sawhorses, both of us smudged with a different kind of work. He'd ask about traffic flow, I'd ask about light dispersion. We argued softly about door placement and fan height and where the load-bearing moments should live. He brought order to what I wanted. I brought insistence to what he sketched. Somewhere in the blueprints, another structure began to rise, one with a kitchen table and 2 mugs that lingered long after the tea was gone. Our relationship began with work evenings and turned into something I had once filed under impossible. He is not a rescuer and I am not a project. He locks the gate without being asked. When I wake from a bad dream, he doesn't offer speeches. He says, "It's secure. Sleep peacefully." As for William, he served his punishment, at least on paper. The community service hours got logged at a shelter where he took photos smiling with boxes, and maybe that helped someone, which I hope. The compensation checks arrived through the clerk's office without notes. His text messages ended, then resumed once with a single question mark that I didn't answer. He hasn't sincerely changed. I can feel it in the way he hovers around excuses like bees around spilled soda. The order still holds. And the distance is a garden edge I weed regularly. My parents still call. Sometimes the voicemail is practical. "Your aunt had surgery. The peaches are good this year." Sometimes it's a recitation of the old creed. "Please forgive your brother." When I pick up, which is rare, I do it on speaker at my desk during daylight, with the order forms visible and the chime of the door reminding us all there is a world outside the script. If a call turns toward bargaining, I say, "We can try again another day," and press end with a steadiness I didn't know I had a year ago. We hung a new sign above the entrance this spring, "Lewis Greenhouse Family." Anthony designed the lettering. Joe installed the bracket. I chose the shade of green. People ask if it's my last name or a mission statement. It's both. For me now, family isn't the people who demand forgiveness for destroyers. It's the people who show up with heat lamps and tape and an extra pair of gloves. Sometimes I stand outside at dusk, when the panes catch the last gold and the interior glows like a lantern. The work is harder and the days are longer, but I can feel the difference. I am not bracing for impact anymore. I am building and being built at the same time. Family is important, but self-respect is far more important. For years, I believed that loyalty meant swallowing my pain, letting insults pass, and pretending that betrayal could be erased by one word: forgive. But standing in the ruins of my greenhouse and later in that courtroom, I finally understood that forgiveness without accountability isn't love, it's surrender. Blood ties don't excuse cruelty. And betrayal wrapped in the name of family still cuts the deepest. My parents wanted me to forget, to excuse, to pretend my brother's actions were just a mistake. But I knew the truth. When someone shatters your dreams with their own hands, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And the people who helped me rebuild, the farmers, the hotel director, my old teacher, and even Anthony, who started out as nothing more than an architect with blueprints, they taught me the new meaning of family. So let me ask you, have you ever had loved ones demand that you forgive someone who shattered your dreams? What would you have done in my place? Share your own experience in the comments below. I want to hear your voice. And if this story touched you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, because there are more shocking true family stories ahead that may just change the way you see your own life.